Hi, bit of a special one today. We've got Petro from Menuteria on this Zoom call, and we're going to do a bit of coaching around your observability situation. So Petro has a Rails app that him from some friends started. He's got one active client at the moment, rather excitingly, and it's a restaurant app. I know, Petro, before we started recording, you kind of went over some of the basics, but if you just want to give a potted history about what your app does, so that I can understand it, the viewers can understand a bit about the context.
Sure. Hey, everyone. So the app is it's a simple online menu accessing by QR code. So you scan the QR code, you see the menu, and some basic features for the restaurant, like making reviews, reserving tables, calling a waiter, making an order. Like there is three kind of orders, like for dining, pickup, and delivery. So basically we have like three types of like dashboards or sites, one for the customers in the restaurant, another for the admins in the restaurant, and the third one is very basic for us, for admins, just monitor the restaurant, the new restaurant, like the very general stuff for developers and for the admins on our side. That's it, like very simple, but very fresh, and we have no observability yet. And when I read your comment or post on the LinkedIn, I was excited about that because I was thinking that it's the perfect candidate for your example. So here am I.
Right. Okay, so the first thing to say is with this is kind of broadly two camps that people fall into. They're either brand new app, no observability, no real traffic or customers yet, or maybe just a hint at some. And their question is very much like yours: how do I set everything up? And then there's kind of the other crowd, which are, I would say, a lot more common, where you've got a legacy app, you've kind of got a whole load of dashboards already, maybe in Dynatrace, maybe in Datadog, maybe in another tool, but it's just not floating your boat, it's not solving the problem, and maybe the app's on fire, maybe it's not, all this kind of thing. So essentially greenfield and legacy, just like we would develop apps. So the approaches to two are relatively quite different. For those of you who've read my other content, for legacy apps, I suggest this 5-step process to observability: ask a question, define the data, build instrumentation, use the graphs or data, and then reflect and go around that 5-step cycle multiple times. For a greenfield app, you need to be a bit more speculative, but still the 5-step process broadly applies. So how much do you know about this 5-step process, Petro?
Honestly, like I recall that some of them just to set it up, like
Yes.
get it going.
Yeah.
But I'm also open for the notes and for the guides right now.
Cool. So let's start out with a question, because the big mistake I see people make on both sides of the aisle, both legacy and greenfield, is they embark upon a 3-month or a 2-month improve observability project. They have all sorts of cards that say add logging. What does that mean? Well, we'll just add logging across the whole app. Okay, well, how long is that going to take? Well, between 2 weeks and 5 years, it's somewhere in that range. And we'll just get to the important stuff when we get to it, I guess. And this isn't very effective. Number one, there's no clear goal apart from add logging. It's a bit like saying, we're going to start a business. What's the goal? Okay, we're going to market to everyone. It's like, so when's the marketing going to be done? When you've reached everybody on the planet? Okay, you could do that, right? And you might get a bit of success, but it'll be accidental and you wasted a whole ton of time. So there's a few problems with this like instrument everything approach. Number one, it wastes your time. Number two, it's not clear the value. So especially if you've got a legacy app or even a greenfield app and your cash is tight, your money is tight, or the stakeholders want to see results, and they start asking questions like, what are the developers doing? You don't want to be saying, oh, the developers are improving our observability, because that means absolutely nothing to them at all. The third problem is that you end up with a lot of, for want of a better term, technical debt. I don't really like that term, but that's another discussion. Lots and lots of code in the code, because all instrumentation code, if it doesn't provide value on the back end, is waste. It's extra complexity. It's extra cruft that you've got to wade through. And in a year's time, 2 years' time, 5 years' time, when you maybe got 100 clients and this thing is going wrong and you need to change it, all that instrumentation code that is giving you no value is just going to get in the way. So instead of this obsession around logs, traces, and metrics, or instead of an obsession around complete a ticket that says improve logging, I use a slightly different approach, which is, first of all, we want to try and figure out what problem are we solving very clearly. And that's what the question stage is for. And so in your case, there'll be a few questions I would have for you. And off the back of that, we can form some kind of a hypothesis. And from that hypothesis, we can form a specific question and then answer that specific question. Now, the difference between what we're doing here is, in a legacy app, we'd have real things going wrong today that we could ask specific questions about. In your case, we don't have those problems. So we're going to guess at what the most likely one might be, and we'll add instrumentation around that. And so the idea is a question will, just to give you an example from my course. So the hypothesis is, the example from the course is there's a defect where it's a cross-stitch pattern making app, and somebody loads a page, they upload the pattern, it doesn't matter the details, they upload the pattern and you don't see a cross-stitch preview appearing and the spinner just spins, so we don't know why it's going wrong. So we might come up with some guesses as to why it might be going wrong. And we come up with 3 guesses, we rank them by likelihood. And based on the guess, we form a specific question. So a specific question might be, is it a pattern with certain dimensions that is creating the defect? Or is this defect across all sorts of patterns equally? So that's like a yes or no questions. And then that's like one of the hardest bits is the beginning. So in your case, let's start out with, and basically, sorry, in a legacy app, in that existing app that I just described, we know the business value. People already complaining about it, it's already a problem. So the most effective question to start out with for you is, what are the parts of this app that if they broke, if something went wrong, customers would have a real problem? So commonly this is things like payments. It's things like somebody shows up at the restaurant and they don't have a booking and you thought it had all gone through. That's going to create a really, really big problem. So let's just list out some problems off the top of your head, and then we'll sort them by order of magnitude of seriousness.
Yeah. Yeah, I believe the most important things, and probably the most simplest one, is that the customer cannot access the menu. So they scan the QR code and they see no menu. Like either the application is broken or the subscription has been ended for the customer, for the restaurant. Yeah, something like that. And then the customers cannot see anything. So that's probably first thing that came into my mind. Yeah, another one is that, like, since I mentioned, we have a couple of the features like leaving a review or or requesting the table. That's also the things that could break potentially. For example, if the captcha is like broken, because we've added the captcha, like Google captcha, and if something goes wrong with that, then it might be an issue as well, and the customers will not able to leave the review or request the table reservation.
So we've got request. Sorry, I'll use your terminology. Leave review and book a table.
Book a table, also call a waiter. like just request a waiter, you know,
Okay.
like.
What you'll see as we're doing this, it's already apparent, but those of you at home who do this, those of you at home, it feels like I'm on a TV show. You'll start to see when you list out these kind of things that could go wrong, what you're really listing out is kind of the value stream of your app. What are the really important things that your app does? And at this point, we want to think in terms of events. There's a lot of engineers and Rails and lots of other frameworks encourage this thinking, who think in terms of CRUD. So you think of invoices create and, you know, creating content, creating the menu, scan a menu, whatever it is. And they think about the current state of the world. What we want to think about here, observability is all about events. That's what you're doing. Because the cool thing about observability is, well, if we take a CRUD app, we might want to book a table, and maybe that table isn't available and there's an error, and then later on it is available. So we get the error, but we get the error when the table is available. So when we go to the database and we look at it, oh, that's a bit strange. The table's available. So why did it go wrong? We went wrong because there was a point in the time, at the time it was booked, the table was unavailable. And so in a CRUD app, usually, unless you have some kind of an audit log or something, the state of the world is lost. All the states of the world are lost. And there was a big eureka moment for me when I was teaching observability to a colleague, and I suddenly realized usually we're querying databases for current state in a Rails app. And observability, we're querying previous events, not the current state. That's all we're doing. Versus querying the current state. So let's think about in terms of events. So customer cannot access menu. So they scan the QR code and it brings up a menu. Is that right?
Yeah, okay.
That's
right.
So the event for this would be menu viewed, or maybe menu scanned, something like that. That would be one event. Another one would be review left. Generally, I'd try and start with the domain object, so review, and then the action in the past tense, review left. And then book a table, table booked, and then request of waiter, requested.
Also, we can add order made, for example.
Fantastic. Is there anything else, any other events that you
can? So we also have some online payments, but they are not really testable now because we don't have a real connection with the Stripe yet. So we cannot do that right now. But another one, it could be like payment successful or like payment failed.
That makes me happy because anything to do with payments is usually quite tricky. So yeah, I've done quite a bit of observability stuff with Stripe in the past, and let's just say it's interesting. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen here, and we'll just go through the events that we're talking about here. Menu viewed, review left. Probably edit this bit. Table booked. Nothing more engaging than seeing somebody just type what they've already just said. Waiter requested, order paid, and it seems to me those are the big ones, right? So let's put those in order of importance. What do you think is the most critical part?
I would say the menu viewed first, order made second, waiter requested third, and then the rest, the both two. Like,
cool.
I would say this order.
Right. So this is kind of part of the questioning stage done. So we need to think of the most likely scenario when they've, let's say, when they've tried to view the menu and they haven't been able to do that. What question would we want to ask? Well, the obvious question would be, what has gone wrong to make them not view the menu? What has gone wrong so the customer can't? And generally, I try and stay away from words like user. Everybody's a freaking user. Let's try and be specific. It's either staff, your domain language is essentially staff, customers, maybe employees for staff, I'm not sure, and then maybe kind of developers or admin or something like that. So what has gone wrong so the customer cannot view the menu? I have Petro has very kindly given me access to his code. I'm not going to share it with everybody on YouTube for obvious reasons. So what kind of area should I be looking at in this code for the menu stuff, Petro?
So there is the like two main domains, which is like first one is the restaurants. You will see it in the, for example, in the top level of the controllers folder. And the second one is restaurator, which is actually the admin of the restaurant kind of stuff, restaurant stuff.
I see, cool. So you've already got two kind of bounded contexts.
Yeah, exactly. So two contexts.
Okay, so I can see restaurants menus controller here, index and show.
Yeah, that's
interesting. So let me open up the
So just mention the index. Index is the one you want to see because when the customer scan the QR code, they're gonna land on the index.
See, add event unless. Okay, so we're adding an event here. Okay. Track the event. So what's this ahoy gem that you're using?
That's for visitor tracking. For example, how many times the menu has been accessed.
So immediately we've got something super interesting here. Okay, this is this may or may not be relevant. So hopefully I don't go on a massive waffle here. In fact, I will not go on a massive waffle. In many companies I've worked, in many teams, we or they see analytics, things like how many menus were scanned. They see analytics as completely separate to observability. Observability is some geeky, sorry, my cups are just rattling here. I'm going to put them to one side. It's very distracting. Analytics is for marketing. It's for business folk who want to understand what the app is doing at a high level. Observability is for the geeks, right? We don't really understand what this observability thing is. It's in the nitty gritty. It's about controllers and something to do with like super techy stuff. Observability, it's like operational concerns. I don't make that distinction so much. Observability actually encapsulates analytics, because there was a huge light bulb moment for me when I realized what's the point of analytics. So business people can say, how many menus have people scanned? And therefore, what's our conversion rate from scanning to booking? That's a question. So it's actually what they do is they go around that 5-step process I just described. They don't realize they're doing it. They say, oh, like what's the conversion rate? That's their question. What's the conversion rate from blah to blah? And in a business context, usually the questions are very well defined because everybody wants to know ROI. They want to know lifetime customer value. They want to know conversion rate, blah, 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 blah. All these things are fairly standard things to run a business off. When we're in the more kind of deep dive technical stuff, and we're in more of an exploration, it's very often a little more murky what exactly we want to ask. So the fact you're saying we've already got some analytics in there is kind of interesting. So as an example of this, we might want to, like in a previous job, I made a like a little event bus using active support notifications so that you could trigger an event like QR code scanned, and then that could be listened to by anything that was interested. So you could have a listener for the business analytics system, whatever that was, and a listener for observability as well. And so the observability would go to your observability tool and so forth. So it's a bit of a wait now, but I just want to raise that as an idea that very often analytics is kind of bound to this specific gem. Maybe it's post hog, maybe it's segment, whatever. And yeah, it's a bit of a shame that we go to that as an industry, because actually it's all really observability. So I can see add event here. If it's not a turbo stream, so why do you want to only track a visit if it's a traditional HTTP request? I mean, I think I can guess, but
let me just open that. You know what? Can you share that screen so I don't like go and don't do it like twice? So I don't mind if we see
okay,
it.
I will drag just this file onto the main screen.
All right, so to be honest, I don't recall this code. So
Okay,
I'm not sure why it's there.
no
Potential,
worries.
so we've used, oh, I know what, because we had some loading, when the customer lands on the HTTP, then we would show the loader and we would have the separate frame, which would send the request. So basically just for the reason of loader. I guess it was changed already and just some leftovers from that. But yeah, that was the reason, because otherwise we would track it like twice. Because we would have like the HTTP, just HTML, index HTML, and then we would have the index TurboStream HTML, ERB. I mean,
Okay.
HTML ERB and TurboStream ERB. And that's the reason why we wanted to limit it only to one record.
Makes sense. So you can already hopefully see that this kind of event thinking is already starting to permeate the code here, right? We've got event type and we've got an event type here. And then this is kind of details about the event. And so I'd say actually you're maybe closer than you realize to something that can be really observed here. So let's just take a step back for a moment. What we're trying to say is, let's say the customer cannot view the menu, and we're saying what's gone wrong so that this cannot happen. So the first thing we need to know is when customers view the menu, because it would be kind of cool if in that particular situation we could have an alert that said, oh, hang on, nobody's viewed the menu for the last 3 hours. That's probably something you might want to have a look at. And so the event would be menu.
That it's in the middle of the night.
Exactly. Well, if it's in the middle of the night, that's a whole different kettle of fish. But yeah, you will want to shrink that alert window down to just only business hours, or maybe with one restaurant, of course, you're probably not going to get that many views. But then you might say, well, like we're expecting at least one view of this every 3 days or every week or something like that. Even if you've got a very small client, if that all of a sudden drops to 0, it's kind of something something going on there. So the event is, so we've got our question, and now we want to look at essentially Well, I think let's pick a simpler question this, because the first question is, can people view the menu right now? Customers view the menu, or are they viewing the menu? Are customers viewing the menu right now? And that's just got a yes or a no. And then when we figure out, oh, hang on, nobody's viewing the menu, then we can start to ask other questions about why that might be. So that's our initial question. It's important to just take small slices so we don't get overwhelmed. Small, very usually very simple questions. Question, are customers viewing the menu? So now we need to define the data. What data should we use to define this? I'm just going to switch to plain text because these errors are bugging me. Define data. So in this, I think about what events do we want? What do we want to filter by? What do we want to group by? And what attributes do we want to search for, essentially? So the event here is very clear. It's menu viewed. Menu.viewed. And this is in the public customer bounded context, isn't it? Or what would you want to call this bounded context? Restaurants or customer or?
The restaurant.
Perfect. So I'm a big fan of namespacing. So I love in code having these kind of segments with dots between them. And then if you look at something like segment, that would have like menu viewed. So in the past, I've created code that converts this dot namespace thing into a human readable name, which maybe excludes the bounded context. But if you start with this kind of bounded context, it's perfect. You've already got bounded context in your app because a lot of people don't. If you do have bounded context, I generally use that as a first segment. The second segment is generally the domain object. And then the last segment is the action that was taken.
That makes sense.
And it's a really nice, extensible, scalable model. And I've worked in places where we've actually put something before the bounded context as well. Maybe there's different sections of the app or completely different teams around the app. Anyway, this also has the other advantage that if you're creating events with these nice dotted names, you can say, show me all the events that happened in the restaurant, every single event that happened in the restaurant. Show me all the events around menus in the restaurant. Show me all events around menus in any bounded context.
Yeah,
by using regular expressions. So it's actually kind of powerful.
It is.
So,
by the way, I just realized that like it's nothing special if you can share the whole code base, since it's not going to be like full picture of full project anyway. So it's going to be easier for us definitely to discuss the code, so you can just simply share it or put it in one window.
Thank you. So right now, I think all we need to do is look at this this controller, but I'll bear that in mind when we come on to all the stuff. That's great. Thank you. So we have all of these different things here. And this is a hint that restaurant menu table and customer ID are all domain objects that would be interesting to track. So given the fact they're in the code base already, I'm going to say these are attributes that we should be tracking. I also, it's very common for people to have these underscores everywhere. It's a very small point, but generally I do this, have namespaced attributes as well. Very often in code, I'll say something like restaurant, and then have a hash in here with the ID and menu ID, etc. This makes it all kind of plug and playable. It makes it kind of modular. What's really nice is if you don't just want the menu ID and you want a bit more fully fleshed out version of the menu, then you can start to add extra attributes about the menu in there.
Yeah, interesting.
Because as we've just said, kind of as time moves on, the menu attributes, of course, will change over time. So it's very often actually really useful to see what was the menu at that point in time when the error occurred. Sometimes I usually start with the ID alone and then drill into the other attributes if we need them. So you get the idea, customer ID, etc. Cool. So these attributes would be restaurant ID, menu ID, table ID, and customer ID. And right now, we probably wouldn't want to group by any of those, but what would be already, I think I can see that if something went wrong with the menu viewed events, what would be super cool is, let's say you've got 16 restaurants as clients, you will be able to group them by restaurant ID and say, oh, hang on, 14 of the restaurants are coming through and 2 aren't. Interesting. Or maybe it's across all restaurants. Or maybe it's only across certain menus in certain restaurants. And all of this kind of stuff is open to you once you start gathering all this data. Any questions before we move on?
No, that completely makes sense and very insightful. That makes sense.
Cool. So the other thing that kind of strikes me, and I have this idea that is relatively actionable for everybody out there, which is called a fact bucket. I'm a very forgetful person. I've been diagnosed with ADHD. I get distracted easily. And so when I'm doing any kind of an exploration or something, looking at doing an audit of somebody's code base, I find myself saying, oh, that's interesting. And then I kind of try and make a mental note and then I forget it. So this fact bucket can really come in handy when you're doing an exploration. So let's say you're drilling into why a menu isn't viewed and you see there's a weird thing here where we're getting like a flood of 404s and then all of a sudden it stops. And you just kind of bump into it, it's incidental. You can say, oh, there's a weird flood of 404s, put that in the fact bucket and come back to it later. So in this case, my spidey sense is tingling a little bit because we've got menus first, which is menu. So menu could, of course, be nil. And then render show unless there's a table. So already I'm seeing there's like potentially a nil that can come through for menu, potentially a nil that can come through for table. And that's demonstrated by your safe navigators here. And so I would say nils are something to avoid wherever possible. It may well be you can't avoid them, in which case that it is what it is. But nils are where bugs gravitate to. So these would be things that I would be tracking. So luckily enough, we've got menu and table. So I'm just going to put that in the fact bucket, table and menu, and in fact, current customer can all be.
So just a couple notes. The table can be nil only because the menu can be accessed just by the link without table identifier. For example, you can put it on the Google website input, and then the customers can view the menu from there. So in that case, we are not like matching the menu with the table. That's the reason why the table could be nil. And the customer is most of the time gonna be nil. Only if the customer wants to make an order, like to order delivery or pick up or dine in, then he has to sign up, and then it became a customer. So just a couple notes.
Yeah, that's all really good stuff. So now we're getting into, in my head at least, we're getting to things that can go wrong now because we're talking about all the different conditions. So this is your domain, so I'm not that familiar with it, so I'm going to ask us a bunch of fairly dumb questions. So you have this QR code, and when somebody scans a QR code, they can book in for a specific restaurant, correct?
Yeah.
So that's why the restaurant ID would never be nil with that, because that has to be there. Menu ID is optional. In what cases would menu ID be on a QR code? Are there different types of QR code and they all go to different?
Yeah, it could be when the restaurant doesn't have any menus. So if the restaurant, for example, if the restaurant has the active link to their like restaurant, but then he forgot or he accidentally disabled all the menus, then it became like we only consider an active menus, for example, and then the menu can be nil because out of this menus list we have an empty array, and then the first just responds with the nil. So that's the case when it can be nil. Either disabling the menus or just accidentally publishing the menus even if you didn't create anything. For
And
example.
in that situation where they have no menus, presumably they still want to accept that booking, right?
Potentially yes, but it's not our case. Probably when there is no menu, we're gonna show some error page or just an empty slate page where it says no menu visible or no active menus, something like that. I'm not sure, to be honest, if there is a link, any links to the booking or reviews. Can actually check this.
So this is already very interesting to me because, gosh, lots of things coming to my mind already. So they scan in this QR code, and the original question we have is, are customers viewing the menu? So if the menu is not there, that is a big problem for the customer, isn't it? That's a big problem for the restaurant.
Yeah.
So the customer is going to get an error, and this happens all the time in apps I've seen. The customer gets an error screen, but because the error screen it doesn't blow up the app, it's just an error screen that sits there. None of the developers get notified, of course, because the app hasn't blown up. The app kind of works. The customer's there going, what the heck? The restaurant's there going, what the heck? I have no bookings. And now you're just like, now the customer is going to be putting pressure on you guys to be like, well, I haven't had any bookings. What's wrong with this app? And maybe it's been out for 3 months, 2 weeks, 1 day, just who knows. So this would be an event that I would track specifically, like customer tried to view menu when there was none or something like that, you know. So we're talking about successful events here. So there's a few different ways you can model this. You can say menu viewed as an event, and you can have a success and a failure as part of the payload. So there's an attribute, we might say success or failure. So it would just be success, true or false.
Yeah.
So in the simplest example, let's kind of go with that. So that's one attribute we want, success or failure. And then of course, if it's failure, we want to know kind of what went wrong. So one of them would be, you'd have something like result, success, true or false. And then you'd have details, maybe. I need to think up a much better structure for this, but details. And this is another thing that kind of drives me. Yes, I get very frustrated, let's put it like that, when I see error messages that are just something went wrong or didn't happen or whatever. So we're going to be very specific here and say code, no menu.
Yeah, so I basically just checked what happened if the all menus are like disabled, then the customer will see all the buttons, and he also will see the blank slate that there is no menu active, there is no active menus. So still he will be able to book and make a review.
Yeah, so this to me would be one of the kind of really big 5-alarm fires that we would want to track. So we have attributes, the error code, no menu found. We have the restaurant ID, the menu ID, the table ID, the customer ID. Cool. Let's talk about table ID, because strikes me if they're if they just want to look at the menu, would the table ID be optional, or is that essential? Or why would the table ID be nil?
No, the table ID only for the dine-in scans. For example, if the customer sat on the table and he scans the QR code from the table, then there is going to be a table ID. But if the customer, there is also the direct link to the menu only without the table, which could be, for example, on the door or anywhere like on the, I would say it's like, forgot, like whatever, anywhere else.
I get it. So once again, this is quite a common thing I see developers doing, which is we overgeneralize things because everything can be a Boolean, and things can be nil or not nil. So I think what would be kind of cool would be we can extend the domain model of menu to have a location field.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's not menu. I beg your pardon. QR code. QR code is a bit implementation heavy, so I don't know I'd use that exactly, but we'd have location of the QR code, and that would be table or door. And now you're starting to describe the domain, right? You're starting to say when they've scanned this. Yeah, it's interesting because it feels like it's not menu viewed anymore. It's actually, but hang on, that QR code is supposed to pull up a menu no matter what, right?
Yeah, like
I see.
menu.
Yeah, so it's really the location of the menu in a way.
Yeah, kind of.
Sort of. It's like, this is where we're starting to see inconsistencies kind of leak out from the domain into the tracking. But let's just say that a menu, if they scan that code, they're outside the building. The customer is outside the building, and it's like a speculative booking, isn't it? It's like, here's the menu. I want to see if there's anything that I like on this menu, and then I can book. If they're inside, they're in a different mindset. So they've not really just viewed a menu. They have, but it's a different context, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like they are ready to make an order.
Yeah,
they are starving.
Exactly. So I would have something to describe that difference, whatever it is. We can obviously you can refine this, but I would say so I don't like using the word context, but it's where the customer is. It's more about the location. So I'll just say location. That can be indoors or outdoors. Maybe at table, outside restaurant, whatever you want. But the key point is, depending on whether indoors or outdoors, you want to track that. You definitely want to track that, because there's different. Anytime I see generic events in the code base where if this is nil, then just miss it out, or if it's there, leave it in. Generally, I start to try and kind of shrink it down and say, can we extract some meaning from that? So the meaning is indoors. So for indoors, it would be all of these things probably irrelevant, aren't they? The restaurant, the menu, the table, the customer, they should all, maybe not the customer.
Yeah, and like optionally, because only the indoor, oh, actually, it's optional for both ways. Because sometimes there could be a customer for outdoors when he wants to make a pickup or delivery.
Yeah, totally. Whereas for outdoors, it's actually a very different deal. I would say customer is still optional. Menu and table absolutely are not going to be there, like never.
No, menu will be because the
Oh, sorry,
menu,
beg your pardon. Table won't be.
yeah,
Menu
table.
Yeah. Restaurant has to be there. Menu has to be there. So by exploring this and exploring the domain, we're starting to see all the different events that we could have. So all of this comes under menu viewed, but there's these different contexts. And immediately, once you start drilling down into some of these attributes, you can start already to see some interesting business analytics that you could pull out of this, almost as like a side effect.
Yeah.
Whereas what you're doing right now is saying the menu can be nil or not. So some business analyst would have to say, oh, well, let's search for everything where the menu ID is missing, and we'll kind of interpret that that means their table ID is missing, and that means they're outside. Whenever the menu ID is missing, then there's something gone wrong, but you have to make that extra leap, right? So observability is trying to understand your system. So the more we can make these events into beautiful descriptive things, the better off we'll be. So, so I've chucked a lot of stuff at you there, but I think there's lots of other improvements and lots of other things I can think to raise, like why is it 1 if there's no customer ID? But I think, you know, we're an hour into the session now, so let's pick some minimal attributes that we can agree on, and then and go from there. So I'm going to say there will be 3 different kinds of events here. There'll be an event. I'm not sure whether they all have different names or it's all the same event. I'm not sure. But event kind of 1 is outdoors success. Event number 2 is indoors success. And 3 is no menu failure. Because if there's no menu and they're indoors, we're in big problems, right? So either way, they both class under there's no menu. And so for an outdoors success, I would be having a set of attributes that look a little bit like success, true. The error code, of course, is irrelevant. The location would be outdoors. Location outdoors. We've got these things. We've got the restaurant.id, menu ID. We've got the customer ID, which is optional. I think that would be quite a nice minimal set of attributes to have. And generally speaking, the way observability works, at least in my experience, is the first like 5 or 6 attributes have, if you choose them correctly, have masses of value. And then if you expand it to 8, it has a bit more value, and expand it to 10, it has decreasing amounts of value as you go on. And you just want to capture just the minimum to make a big difference. So location indoors, the ID, menu ID, and then we definitely want this to have a table ID. And this again raises a failure mode that we've not really talked about so far, which is if they're indoors and they don't have something, for some reason it can't find the table, we need to like, that I would say is even more important than menu viewed outside, because they're inside right now and they need, they're trying to scan the menu, and that's going to be kind of in event storming. People talk about what's the kind of time window at which these events happen, and they talk about in seconds, minutes, days, or months, something like that, as in like how time sensitive is it. And this to me is like a seconds kind of a time scale of an event. You want to know within seconds if somebody scanned that QR code and the table has gone away or something, because that would be very serious. So no menu failure. Whereas if they're outdoors and there's no menu, that's kind of, it's still problematic, but you maybe want to have a slightly longer window on that one. So no menu failure. It's going to be success false. The error code, I don't like this structure, by the way. I'm not suggesting we use this exact structure, but let's just get the attributes down and then we can restructure it. Error code might be no menu. And then location is outdoors or indoors. Restaurant ID has to be there. Menu ID has to be there. Menu ID is not there by definition because there is no menu. And then optional customer ID. So if we just kind of put ourselves in the world where we have these three different kind of event payloads, in my head at least, you're already in a much, much better position than you're in now, which is to say, you can say, oh, there is no menu. And we know that for a fact. And we can have an alert that when somebody scanned that, there was no menu. And we can have a different severity of alert depending on whether we're indoors or outdoors. Indoors would be, we get that through into our observability tool, and it's like immediately phone the restaurant right now and say, hey, there's somebody, customer at this blah, 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 at your restaurant. And of course, you don't know the, you know the table ID? If they're indoors, you'd know the table ID, wouldn't you?
Yeah, potentially, yes. Because it can happen in any case.
Yeah, so this is kind of pointing to the no menu failure that should have one for indoors and one for outdoors, but that's going a bit too far. So let's just leave that for now. But once again, you could see, oh, holy crap, like the location is indoors. And then you say to the restaurant, and by the way, they're at table number 16. So then the restaurant just don't go, like, how cool is that? Imagine if you had a developer who rang you up and said, there's a problem with table 16. You need to create a menu for them. As a customer, you would be a happy camper.
Yeah, exactly. And also, I just realized that we also have zones, and the tables relates to the zones. And then you can assign the menus to the zones. And one of the reasons why the customers cannot see menus for the specific table is that the zone doesn't have like someone forgot to connect the zone with the menus. Because for example, if there is the for example the summer terrace, then you want to serve the cocktails only there, so you will assign the like cocktails menu only. So just to know as well.
And start to see all these different reasons start to flesh out, right?
Yeah.
And again, imagine as a developer, you go to your observability tool and it just says, hey, there's no menu. It was indoors. The zone was disconnected. The table ID was that. You're like,
yes,
I know exactly what to do.
Easy. Because now you have to go to the terminal. Then we use Camel, check Camel logs, try it like.
I've done it myself. I've done it myself 1,000 times in different Heroku, Kamal, whatever. And it drives me bonkers. And then to make matters worse, as we said before, maybe things have moved on now. Maybe one of the staff behind the till realized, oh, I need to connect this zone. Oh, you messed up, Johnny, and Johnny connects the zones. Now you go into the console, now they're all connected, but the error happened 2 hours ago. Do we, like, how do we know that that was a thing? And with observability, of course, you can then ring the restaurant the moment it happens, potentially, and you can say, hey, this zone was disconnected. And then you can start to produce stats on how many zones were disconnected this month. And this means it's a staff training issue. And then the restaurant get insight into how the restaurant's running, as well as you getting insight into how the app's running. And it, like, everybody wins, basically. And this is why I'm so freaking passionate about observability, because it's not just like, oh, do we have some logs? It's like, it's much bigger.
That's very exciting when you like make something that it's going to help you save you a lot of the time. That's amazing.
Cool. So let's talk about the next stage, which is build. So we now have this event. We don't know what we want to filter and group by right now, because different errors are going to come up potentially, but we've got these different attributes, and that's a great start. So I'm just trying to think, should these be 3 different events? I reckon they should be, you know, restaurant, indoor menu viewed, and outdoor menu viewed. Oh, no, in fact, sorry. No, I know what we're going to do. We're going to make the location an attribute of menu. That's cool. Okay. So in order to define this, it'd be nice to just flesh out these attributes a little bit so that we don't have all these special conditions. The location is not, it's a bit difficult to tag location onto menu, but let's just do it for now. It doesn't feel quite right, but it feels like there's something like whether the QR code is on the inside or not. I don't know, but let's
maybe like source, accessing source.
Yeah, I like it.
Source, just no.
And source is outdoor. Oh, wrong way around. And QR code I don't really like because it's tying you to an implementation, but let's leave it for now. So menu ID, source, let's switch source up to the top because that's kind of a root level thing.
Oh, there's another third option, is just a direct link from the, for example, from the Google or Instagram. When you attach the link to your bio in Instagram, or for example to the Google, to your website field. So there is no need, like it's not QR code actually, just a link.
Right. So really interesting. I'm still going to go with location indoor. I still like location, and let's just leave it as that for now. But what's super cool is we can say location physical outdoor, location physical indoor. I'm sure you can see what's coming next. We can say, in fact, we can dot notate that as well. Show me all the times the menu has been scanned in any physical location at all. We can have indoor, outdoor, like out back, on the walls, on posters, blah, 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 blah. And then location can be virtual, .Instagram, .Facebook, whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And also I've got an idea we don't tie the QR codes outdoor locations to anything, but maybe there is a good reason to tie it for something. Like for table, we have an ID, but for the door, we didn't think about that. That's also could be nice.
It's nice that when you start exploring the domain in this way, your brain starts to go, oh, we could do this, we could do this. And it's not saying we're going to do anything like this, but Kent Beck talks a lot, not a lot, but he's starting to talk about it now. Have you read Tidy First, his book on software?
Nope.
It's an amazing book. I haven't read it, but I've seen one of his summary talks, and he talks about the design of software. He said he was sat down to write the book Tidy First. And he's been trying to write this book for, I think it's like 12 years or something. And he kept coming back to it. And he said the last time he came back to it, the first words that he typed were, software design is an exercise in human relations. And he was like, no, that can't be right. What the heck? And so he comes up with 3 circles that software design is all about. The first one is social. And he said that this is the most important thing. It's about how teams communicate, chat to each other, etc. The second one is the economics of software, which almost nobody talks about in our developer world. They talk about it a ton in the business world, but in our world, we hardly ever really talk about it. And then the third one is the bit that you and I all know and love, the technical stuff, refactoring, coupling, all the rest of it. So the economics, he says that there are the two kind of aspects are, there's a tension between cash flow and optionality, which is the first time I've ever seen it like this. So all these people who like hack in the code and they're creating masses of technical debt, but they're creating cash flow, right? Because they're delivering the features, they're getting money into the business, and it's all good. The problem is that after 5 years of doing that, you can't change the code. So you have no freedom, you have no optionality. You can't say, oh, maybe the code should do this. So what we're doing right now is not cash flow stuff. You're not getting any new customers from this. This is a time that you're not going to get back in terms of new customers, but we're getting optionality. It's opening the doors for in the future you being able to say, well, maybe we can. Oh yeah, we can just create a new event that says location, virtual, or on banner or whatever.
Yeah, it's kind of the same thing when like 10 years ago there were some debates about writing the tests. So initially they postponed the delivery of the feature because sometimes you have to spend like twice as long as making the feature. But later, when you just need to update something or you've got some bug, you need to do a lot of the manual stuff, manual checks. And on the longer run, you are winning a lot with the unit tests because you've spent the time in the right period of time, like when it was the most efficient on the beginning.
And one mistake I made a lot, and I'm not ashamed to admit this, okay, I'm a little bit ashamed to admit this, is that I added the optionality too early. And so I've been accused of making castles in the sky before now, which is probably fair at some point in my career, because I get so carried away with design stuff sometimes. I'm like struggle knowing when to, okay, tone it down. We don't need this right now. It's nice to just open the door a little bit and be like, okay, we've got some optionality for the future. Now let's deliver some stuff that's going to make some money. So there is a balance there always.
That was me, to be honest.
No, but I do love this. And what we're really doing now is design. Anyway, so now we've got our success, location, restaurant, menu, customer ID, and that's consistent across all of these different things. Error code is the only bit I don't really like. Success, false, failure. Failure reason is maybe slightly better. We can say sometimes I make failure or error a hash, but in this case we can just make it a reason and move on with our lives. Yeah, we could add more in, but what I generally like to do as well, I say with errors, is I want to encapsulate everything I need to know to fix the error. I don't want some error, then we go, oh, right, let me do some more work to get more information about this error. What the heck is the point of that? What I want to see is an error with the table ID that went wrong, with the menu ID, the customer ID, the blah, blah, blah. So I can just go, okay, I have everything. It's an encapsulation problem, I think. Like I see these errors with like 2% of the error there and 98% of it's just gone. All right, well, that's not much good to me. Something happened. Oh, well, nice. That's good. What exactly happened? I don't know. Okay, great. Thanks. I see it as a conversation with the software. So, sorry, go on.
Yeah, that's the common issue, because in my career in the past and some previous projects, I've always seen this. Like we introduced that kind of field to everything, and then it just polluting the logs, the everything, and you don't actually have any insight that you wanted to have, and it takes more time to investigate and explore.
Exactly. And this is why, it's exactly why we start with a specific question. Not why is the software broken? No, who cares? Let's start with a specific question. Why can the customer not? So it might be no menu, it might be a disconnected zone. And so again, I'll leave this as an exercise for you because time's moving on. But if it was a disconnected zone, the question would be, what data would I want to see? Would this data be enough so I could debug it? Maybe, maybe not. You might want to add a zone ID in there, or you might want to add the thing that the zone should be connected to and it isn't. So all these are things to think about. Cool. So we now say build. This is the step where we put this into practice. And it makes me laugh that most people, I don't mean this in the mean way, because this stuff is not taught anywhere. And I just don't understand why nobody teaches this stuff. There's loads and loads of conference talks with, here's what logs are, here's what traces are. All right, figure out the rest yourself. That's not actually that important. That's the implementation details. This is like the skeleton of how it all hangs off. So what you'll find is people start at the build stage, like, right, let's get some logs in there. What do I log? And this is what I used to do. Like just 3 years ago, I was doing this. And so I would just get super confused. I'm like, oh, I don't understand this observability stuff. I'm supposed to log everything just in case. So the build stage is, the first thing I always do is check, has the project got a semantic logger?
Doesn't yet.
Yeah. So we're not going to add this right. Oh, you've got OpenTelemetry. Okay, interesting. And you've got file. Nice. Sorry, what are you going to say?
Yeah, just added, recently.
Yeah, nice. Very cool. So, okay. So I say I add semantic logger, but that's only if we want to use logging to do this kind of stuff.
Yeah, the semantic logger was the next thing that I wanted to add. So we can consider that there is one.
Yeah, cool. Okay. So I would start with logging and not tracing, purely because with tracing there is a lot more to remember. There's a lot more to do. There's a lot more to get your head around. And I've found, purely for me, when I started, I mean, I spent like 6 months on and off, keep coming back to tracing, trying to understand what it even was. I couldn't find a good definition online, and I just went in circles and circles. I now understand what it is, but even now, I think it can be deceptively tricky to get right. Whereas with logs, you can start as each log as a specific event and start to build from there. And when you get more confident with logs, now I'm pushing into traces with a lot of stuff I'm doing. But I've had to get comfortable with just logging for 2, 3, 4 years, and I'm still learning all the time. So let's just assume we're using logging. So I do bundle add semantic logger and Rails semantic logger. I think you can just do Rails semantic logger and it'll install both. I think it's just a dependency. So we'll just quickly do that. Let's see if it adds semantic logger for us. Let's see. What's it done? Yeah, cool. It's added semantic logger and Rails semantic logger. Fab. That should be at the bottom there. Great. So we can now do some structured logging. What observability tool are you using currently?
So the Honeycomb.
Honeycomb. Okay, cool. So we can, with Rails semantic logger, I believe I've created an exporter for Honeycomb. I think I'm right with that. So I will find that code and send it to you. So with Rails semantic logger, you have these things called appenders. So you have the logger, so you just say logger.info dot blah blah blah, usual deal. If something went wrong, you would never have that as a message, of course. And you can then say all the structured data here. So that would be the, let's just switch the part down. So this would be sorry, rails.logger.info, of course. Info. And then separately an initializer, it would be like config/init. Of course, you'd have logger.appender.add, I think it's something like that. You can just look at the docs. Appenders. So these are the ones that come out of the box. But the nice thing is that you can take their HTTP appender and tweak it a little bit, change the endpoint, and Honeycomb has an HTTP and add append. Beg your pardon, appender add. I was nearly close. That was close. No cigar. And so we can do appender HTTP and HTTP. I think it's like endpoint or something. Yeah, URL and then token. And this will be customized to be all the Honeycomb stuff. And then we give it some Honeycomb credentials, obviously putting in your environment. And then this will just go into Honeycomb. It'll all be good. We can also, actually, that's not quite true. We need to create a formatter. And the formatter is a thing that will change the logs into something in proper OpenTelemetry semantic structure that Honeycomb can understand. OpenTelemetry, I guess I call it OpenTelemetry semantic conventions.new. So OpenTelemetry semantic conventions. These are quite tricky to get your head around, but this is the best bit of OTel, I think. So people seem to see OTel as you install this library, you start using it, everything's good. Sadly, in the Ruby world, that's not quite where we're at. It gives us some minimal tracing for some gems out of the box. And it's actually quite good if you're using active job and Sidekick or any of those kind of things. It's great for Faraday as well, but it leaves a lot of stuff out. And also it's quite, in a sense, quite heavyweight. I hope the OTel folks don't mind me saying that. And it's also quite behind some of the standards. There's a very small team working on it. I've been to a few of the SIGs. I've not contributed to it anywhere near as much as I should have done. But the semantic conventions give you a lot of the value of OTel without having to do all those heavyweight kind of adding traces to absolutely everything. So semantic conventions is just a way of saying we're going to use these as standard attribute names for everything. So in my GitHub, in my workshop, I have a OTel. It's not this. Is it the Dynatrace one? It's not. Second, I've got the code somewhere here, initializers. This is it. So this will give us some standard conventions for just for HTTP requests, and then we'll extend this for our use. So we go like this. For some reason at the time when I was creating this, I called it flat JSON formatter, which is just ridiculous. It's OpenTelemetry's semantic conventions. And then we use that. by creating an initializer. I think I've done it after. Yes, here we are. So this is for Dynatrace, which is the company I work for, but we'll be able to customize this for Honeycomb. I do have some Honeycomb code somewhere. Might even be able to dig it out while you're on the call, actually. So this would be the Honeycomb stuff. And then we'll have our semantic conventions. And then any authorization headers can go here, pending. Oh, get rid of that. And you can just put that up here, get rid of that. And then I generally like to just first put everything in one file, and then you can iterate on it and tweak it. And then once it's all working, you can move the OpenTelemetry semantic conventions, format it to another thing if you want. So deep merge payload, deep merge name tags. Right. Yes. So this would be what's your company name again? Menu. Syria. Dot app or something like that. Host root method, status code, namespace, action. So this would be for every single HTTP request, you'd get an event in Honeycomb. And then that would give us the standard HTTP request response stuff. And then in order to add these extra events on top, here's what we would do. To an menus controller, let's think about this for a moment. We want to add event unless request format turbo stream. So the super cool thing is we can, is that still a good idea? I was just thinking we could always create an event, even if it is a turbo stream, and then just tell.
Yeah, it's not longer relevant, as I mentioned, because we moved that part of things, so it's only money. Yeah.
Fantastic. Sorry, I forgot you said that. Cool. So add event. This is actually adding. Do you know where Ahoy can Ahoy like send to multiple destinations?
To be honest, I'm not sure.
I just want to understand a little bit. Right, first party analytics for Rails. JavaScript. Okay. Creates a visit. Okay, cool. Oh, so good. Name and properties. Super cool. So it's not a million miles away from what we want to do. We just want to send this to Honeycomb as well as Ahoy. Okay. So where does it send it? That's what I'm trying to understand. Does it create database tables inside the app for it?
Yeah.
Sorry, the clue is probably in first party analytics. Like I read that, it just washed over me. First party us, third party somebody else. Right, okay. So this is creating internal events in our database. Super cool. So let's add in the logging as a separate method for now, and then we'll see how we can refactor it. And I would love to have a follow-up call with you to refactor it, to be honest, because I absolutely love refactoring. I like a bit too much. Let's just call this internal event to distinguish it. Oops. Internal event. And then you're doing some updates as well. Interesting. So you're tracking this internal event. And we're going to say add external event. there's loads of improvements we could make to this, but I'm just going to now anybody who sees me doing any TDD course will be absolutely horrified right now. You don't practice what you preach, John. You're not doing any TDD. So use controller spec. Do you have a spec for this?
I think I do, but it's not. I'm not sure what's the state of that. So yeah, we only had some TDD like specs for the critical part of the.
Cool. No worries. It's a very, very short method, is it? It's like get the menu and then. So let's just very quickly. Oh, I'm not actually in cursor. Let's see if we can just create a quick test for this. App, config, spec, controllers. I know you can't see anything right now. Let's go Rails G. Honestly, can't remember a generator for a controller test. I think it's functional test or something.
I always created like manually.
We're using RSpec here, aren't we?
RSpec, yeah.
RSpec, cool. Let's just create it manually. So we're going to go file controllers.
Is there a request folder like under the spec?
Oh yeah, okay.
It should be under requests.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Restaurants, and yeah, so you can create it here.
So I'm still quite old school in that I'm still writing controller tests for some things. I still quite like controller tests, but that's just me. Get rid of that. Okay, cool. Let's just grab as much of this stuff as we can.
Funny, I'm doing always the same. Like when I create a new file, I'm just going one file above the one I created and copying the require Rails helper and RSpec describe. It's so easy to write, and now Copilot can help you, but I still doing it manually.
Get slash is this that?
Yeah.
And then it's path.
So the yeah, menu space. And also just so we are getting the menu, the restaurant from the URL.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Menus first for set menus. Oh, you've got menus. Oh, it's inheritance. Wow, okay. Oh, and then you do a before with accessing the load restaurant. Okay. Find by subdomain. Oh, this is getting a bit hairy. Do you know what I should do off the top of your head because we want to create a restaurant, don't we?
take a look at the controller. Yeah, here.
Which control? This one?
Yeah, no, the tests. The test. I mean the
Yeah,
test.
yeah.
And take an example from there. Scroll top. Should be something there. Yeah, just
yes, of course.
also before you set up the host, like before action. You see the yeah. Okay, you remove the current card. Don't need that. Yeah.
Just going to shrink this down a little bit. I don't think we need the headers, do we?
No, we don't. We don't need any headers. So params can be empty. The most important thing is that subdomain from the restaurant is matching the host. So you can also remove that in the before. You can remove that first part of the before action. Yeah, this one, like the, yeah, you don't need that. Okay, you can try to hit run the spec. What the heck?
This might be just a bit too much to try and attempt.
Yeah.
You do have some pretty decent docs on Docker Compose. I try and stay away from Docker just because I've had so much pain and heartache with it. Oh man, I don't. Yeah, we need to create a role, a Postgres.
You can adapt to your, for example, if you already have the existing role in the user, you can just update the database YAML.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, for the development, what's that? Yeah, just update here.
J Gallagher. I can't just remember.
Yeah.
Oh, what a guess. My own name. Oh, I can remember my own name. It's a miracle. Whatever, hotel.
It is probably because of that third body that you added. No?
I'm not running the tests right now. I'm just doing bin setup. So it's cranking up the app and it's trying to export spans, but it's not actually, yeah. Missing active record encryption credential.
Probably the master key that you're missing, no?
Could be, but I've not generated a master key in about 3 years. I don't remember how to do it.
I believe I have to share mine because it has to be like shared if you want to access the same set of credentials, but we probably do not use the credential. So I'm not sure why.
No, definitely don't. Let's just write the code as if we're doing it, and we will we'll catch up on a separate Zoom potentially to actually get this working. But kind of the principle would be you'd have your get, you'd have your restaurant, whatever it is, restaurant.
So since you have a host which is demo.localhost.com, then you don't need to pass, like it's gonna be it's matched with the subdomain. So yeah.
And I made at my previous role a little helper that I need to recreate, but it went something like this: capture logs. And so you could pass in a block, execute some code, and you could then test the logs and what they contain.
Oh, yeah.
And it would look a little bit like first log should be message something. I don't really care about the message at all. Everybody starts with a message. I spend my time elsewhere. And in the OTel semantic conventions, what we want is event.name to be the name of the event. That's the standard. So we'll go back to our thing here. And we'll have restaurant.menu.view. Making a right pig's ear of this. Okay. Nice and neat. And then what I do is I always assume that the root level of this event is that domain object. So the menu would have the attributes location, and that would be just hard code it for now. There's the call that indoor, and let's go through some other stuff. Let's do outdoor success first of all. So copy these across. You'd have success true. In fact, in terms of OpenTelemetry, I believe it's actually error or is error. So the true or false, which is a bit counterintuitive. Let's just put success true. We can maybe reformat it later. And then restaurant. ID is this restaurant ID. Yeah. Do we have a customer in this test?
Yes. But you can easily create like a separate entity, create customer.
Yeah.
It's gonna... Yeah.
Single quoted strings, fine. So generally speaking, once I've written the body of the event, so this should be event name, and then the rest of it should not be pushed into event. It should be at the root level. Because, in fact, sorry, this should be under, yeah, for OpenTelemetry semantic conventions don't tell you yet where the domain should go, the domain specific information. They don't have any convention for which keys. So I generally use app as a top level key. But that is maybe not such a good idea. It's not a reserved thing. They used to have an app key, but then they kind of got rid of it. But I would say that this app should link to the menu. If you want, you could also do menu. That might evolve my practice to actually be explicit about the thing that we're tracking here. So the point is that we have a menu here. The ID goes at the top always, because that's, in fact, it's not the menu that's successful, it's the event. So probably put success at the top level. And then app is app specific stuff about your app that is nothing to do with like HTTP requests or anything. It's domain logic. And under that, we have the top level domain object, which can match this if you wish, or you can just remove that. And then we have ID, the menu location, the restaurant of the menu, and the customer is not really tied to the menu. So that would be down here. So basically what I'm trying to do is reflect the structure of the domain and the structure of the objects and the structure of the event.
All
And
right.
then when you're in your observability tool, you can say app.menu.id should be this, or group by app.menu.id, group by app.customer, group by app.menu.restaurant.id. And then it actually makes intuitive, logical sense. Oh, I see, we're going down the tree of objects rather than people doing all sorts of weird and wonderful. Sometimes it's like menu underscore ID and then there's no consistency. This way you can create a nice little nested tree of relationships.
Yeah, that makes sense. And where do you define that structure originally? Like in the separate, like in each request, or somewhere in that conventions, like when you on the wall, like near the initializer, or I don't know.
It's a really good question. There's many different answers to that. At my last role, I went down the route of creating JSON schema for each one of these events. And we got a little way into it, but the team, we just had more important things to do than map all this out in a perfect JSON schema. But I think there's a huge opportunity here to make a tool that creates JSON schemas for events. And then you just call AI or some script and you say, hey, I want a restaurant.menu.viewed in this controller, please. And it hooks you up in the test, hooks you up in the view, hooks like just creates a code, all this boilerplate that we just read and splurges it in there. I also wrote a little validator. So basically, the way it used to work was I had this active support notifications, and you put a notification on the bus that one of these events had occurred. And then before it was sent to our observability tool, there was a validator that validated it against the JSON schema. So that way, you weren't ever going to be missing events. You weren't going to be having, in this case, menu ID should always be there. And that meant in production at runtime, if menu ID was not there, it would validate it against a JSON schema. It wouldn't blow up because we wanted everything to carry on, but it would generate a sentry error for us. And then we look in that sentry error and we're like, oh, an event's being generated that shouldn't be there. And then we would debug why event menu ID was missing. This would be on really critical events.
Yeah. And the validator, did you build it or you use some dry
Yeah.
validation? Because I know that
it was kind of a combination. I used JSON's schema gem just because this supported the most recent, at the time at least, it was the most up-to-date one for Ruby, supported some pretty cool validation things. The other super cool thing is that you can get it to validate the event schema, and you call a method, I think it's errors. I can't remember. Error. Oh, wow, you can define custom error messages. Holy cow, I didn't know that. That's super cool. But anyway, yes, so I figured out how to basically get all the errors from the validation, and then those errors will go into the sentry error. And so then it was clear, like you're missing menu.id or whatever, or like it would be ideal for this kind of thing for a location. You can only have physical indoor and physical outdoor. If you can have physical outdoors, plural, then somebody's put something wrong into here. Because to me, observability data, especially when you start getting to using it for business analytics, is just as important as database data.
Yeah, true. Nice. I never heard about validating the payloads before, like sending somewhere that
it's depending on what you're trying to do, it's probably going a bit far. But I just think this whole area, we're in the prehistoric age of observability, and I'm trying to push us into the Neolithic or something. I don't know what comes after prehistoric. I'm just trying to make small advances here. But yeah, so this event would be validated. If it was success, it would go through to the observability tool. If it didn't, then it wasn't. And then the ultimate goal with this would be you'd be able to run a little script and generate all the documentation for all the events in a wiki that you could share with your team. So your team would just be like, oh, like show me all the events that are around the restaurant. Boom, there you go. There's 5 of them. You can click into them, and then you could even like have hyperlinks within that page. You click on it, it goes to your observability tool, does a filter for all those events, and then you can drill down more into it from there. So it would all start to link together.
It's really cool. Yeah.
Cool. So yeah, that's how I would test the logs. The capture logs thing, it was like a 5-line piece of code. I attached a string appender as basically an IO in-memory appender into Semantic Logger, and then stored that, ran the block. It would log to that string appender just in memory, and then I would remove the appender and wrap all that array of things just in a nice little interface. So you could do find by, find one, find many, whatever. But I don't actually have that code because I use that as in a previous role. I need to recreate that code, but it's completely possible. Happy to pair further with you on that. And then the idea is that this would give you a nice little error message saying either there's no logs or the first log is not this or whatever. I actually did find by event.name. I have this kind of, so just borrowing the same interface from active record basically. And you could do find by event name restaurant. Yeah, this is what I would do now. I need to create this this little bit of code again. But basically, this find by event name restaurant menu booked is really useful because a find by can throw an exception that lists all the event names that are currently being logged. And so you don't have to wade through hundreds and hundreds of lines of like, oh man, something's gone wrong with my logging, and now I just have this huge, massive error that I can't even read. And it would say, HTTP request received, HTTP this, restaurant.menu.view, and you'd be like, oh, I made a typo, it should be viewed. And then you can fix the typo and then you'd be off to the races. So that's something I'd suggest doing as well. So then you run that, obviously it would fail, and you go here. And in terms of the actual production code that you need, I've almost like been saving the best till last. So this is what you would do. You do logger.info message. We'll fill that in a minute. I don't really care. And then we have essentially all of this. Of course, add external event, restaurant menu viewed. Cool. And then, of course, you can probably guess at the rest. Menu.id. Now, of course, at this point in theory, the menu can have a nil ID. So let's deal with that. So we've got menu nil ID. If the menu has a nil ID, well, if it has an ID, then right now we can assume it's a physical indoor table, can't we?
So table, you can use table as an identifier. Like if there is the table ID, then
That's
it's
right.
probably physical indoor.
You're right. And then physical. Oh. Okay. Whoops. I'll type Ruby. So if that's there, then it's an indoor, which makes sense. If not, it's an outdoor. And then restaurant should always be there. Customer isn't always going to be there. So
Just
I don't,
there.
yeah, I don't really like making things nillable, but this is just an example, I guess. And then menu. Let me just go back to our thing. So for outdoor success, there was a menu. For indoor success, there always has to be a menu, right? Otherwise, it's a problem. And we want no menu failure. Right, perfect. So we go, what we do is, if menu, very clunky, I know, it's going to be huge. but I'm about to show you another way of compressing all of this. So we do all of this, blah, 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 at menu. We can now depend on the menu being there. Obviously, the location is depending on the table. And then do this. If it's not there, we can say that there is no menu. And then we can say physical indoor or outdoor, depending on the table. The restaurant is still required. Success is false. And then the error reason is we can just say no menu for now, but we can extend that over time to be zone disconnected and all that good stuff, right? What's interesting to me now looking at this is that it has no menu, but there's a menu in the event, which doesn't make sense to me. You don't have a menu.
Yeah.
So there's something about this is not the location of the menu, right? Because it can't be, because we don't have a menu. So that kind of lends itself to be something like
accessible point. I don't know.
or accessible point. Yeah, exactly. Accessible points. Let's just do that. How about that? Yeah, that's definitely better. And in this way, we're actually starting to evolve our domain logic as well as our observability. So it's kind of a win all round. Yeah, so there's no menu. There is an accessible point. There is a restaurant. There is a customer. So therefore, the restaurant isn't part of the menu at all. The restaurant is up here. So try and keep a consistent structure if I can. In this case, the menu isn't there, so that makes complete sense. I also try and name, as you've seen, I try and name my keys by the domain objects. So this to me is kind of pointing to the fact that maybe we should have a domain object that denotes the QR code, and then you could have an attribute, whether it's indoor or outdoor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And how do you usually keep these like huge caches, hashes, like in the controller, or you have a special way of handling that?
Yeah, I do. I'm glad you asked. So there's a few different practices I've experimented with here. Yeah, there's a lot to say here, but the way I see it, just at a high level, is that we have a domain object and we have an event. And that event is on the domain object. And really what we should be doing is converting that domain object into a structure that we can send to our logs. We shouldn't be in our control having all of this crap here. So it doesn't compress it that much in this case, but if we had, so we've got a menu. So I would say menu is at menu. And then I'm experimenting with this idea of to formatted H. Basically, you could have, does the menu know about the restaurant and the customer or no?
The menu?
Yeah.
Only about the restaurant.
Only about the customer, yeah.
Restaurant, not the customer.
Oh, I see, right, the restaurant, not the customer. In any case, what I do is have accessible points. accessible point to formatted age,
Yeah.
all this kind of thing. And then you shrink this down a little bit. You still have these like quite chunky hashes.
But it's already better. I agree.
Yeah. The accessible point, of course, could be built at any point in your controller, and then you just have this to formatted H on it. What's really nice about this approach, I haven't done this in a production code base yet, but let's say you've got a accessible point, the main object here. They've got to formatted H. What we can do is, let's say this is an episode record. And we can say attributes, and then it's deep symbolize keys. That will, you've got to be a bit careful with deep symbolized keys. But not deep symbolized keys, because attributes just gives you the top level attributes. So it's really just symbolized keys actually. And that will spit out, the attributes give you strings as keys, which I don't really like, keys as strings, and then it symbolizes them. And then you merge that with the location. Although you probably have a location attribute in here anyway, you can kind of do whatever you want in this method. But the point is that I just want to preserve this for you somewhere. Location. Let's just merge it in. Let's pretend that this already has table. Let's pretend the accessible point has an attribute table, and it can be nil or not. Merge that in. And my idea here was then to, super cool thing is you could, sorry, old habits die. You could then do a slice, and depending on the format that you've passed in, you can just output the ID, or you can output all the attributes. So you could say, then if format equals minimal, you just, this is all attributes, of course, attributes. You just say attributes dot slice ID. So by default, it'll just give you the ID of an object. Else if format equals like hotel, or format equals maximum, and you can just give them all of them, and so on and so forth. So, and then the idea is this would be a little mix in that you just push into an include. And so every single object that you want to be formatted as an H for the logs, you could just add this mix into everything, and it would all just work. And you wouldn't have to monkey around with this to the same degree, and you could just go to formatted H.
Yeah, that's a great workaround.
Still, I'm not happy with the size of this. It just means that if there is no menu, potentially you could have a higher level concept where it was like missing menu and use a null object pattern, you know. So then you could be like at menu to formatted H, and then maybe it would build all of that other stuff in, and you wouldn't need the if menu. And then even if menu is missing, you have like a missing menu object that to formatted H gives you the error reason and the success false and all that kind of good stuff, you know. So there's options. There's no silver bullet, but when is there ever?
Makes sense. I'm sure after a few hours of playing with this, we can make it very pretty.
Yeah, sure. I'd also actually potentially depending on how risky I'm feeling. I'd also potentially define toFormatted H on nil, so that it would just come back with an empty hash. Monkey patch, I don't really like doing it, but
All right.
and then the last stage, and of course we can't do it because we don't have your full setup. So that's, we've just done the build stage, and then the final stage will be to use. So you put all this in, you deploy it to production, and the first cut will 100% be wrong. You'll look in your observability tool and you're like, oh man, it's missing all this stuff, or you just won't see any events at all, or there'll be some token that's wrong, or get some weird error, whatever. And then you just keep improving until you see the events. And then the next question is, you look at the events in your tool, and you say, if there was a production issue right now, would this be enough?
Yeah.
Maybe it would, maybe it wouldn't. And it requires a bit of, speculative guesswork. Requires you to kind of say, just imagine that a customer couldn't scan the menu. How would I feel about that? Would it be enough to, and obviously you could like simulate some errors, of course. You could unlink the menu, scan the QR code and see it come through.
Yeah. Great. Yeah, we can definitely make a follow-up call with this set it up and playing around with the observability tool, like over there. Make some queries, show some details, some edge cases.
Yeah. So let me just see if, before we end the call, see if I can find wondering if I can find my honeycomb appender. Thought I had something in. Oh yeah, I think I've got something in that actually. I do. Yes, I do. Oh man. Oh, that's OpenTelemetry. Yeah, I will try and find the app where I've done logging to Honeycomb. Yeah, I'll find it and send it on to you.
Okay.
Yeah, and then of course, kind of the long-term goal of this would be to unify this with this and have essentially one interface where you just say, track this event, please. And then there's a listener, or maybe not active support notifications because there's problems with that. But you could have a single interface. They'd be like, hey, I want this event to be generated. I don't care where it goes. And then you have a bit of code that says, if the event is this name, then it goes to Honeycomb and Ahoy. If it's just Ahoy, it goes, etc., etc.
Yeah, makes sense. Cool.
And the super cool thing is you can start to, hopefully Ahoy allows you to have nested keys. And if it doesn't, in the past with my segment I made a little segment formatter that just compressed all the keys into, because segment didn't like these nested keys in the way I've done here. So it just compressed them. So it was like, it removed strip tap out and it just said accessible point _ location and compressed it all down to one level. But at that point, it's how the tool wants it to be formatted. And there you thought you like decoupling the formatting from generating the event in the code.
Yeah, definitely. There's a workaround for that. Cool. Yeah. That
Any
makes sense.
questions before we go?
Um, yeah, that was really, really valuable for me. Like, I thank you very much for that.
Welcome.
And no questions. I just want to play around with that and see how it behaves on the observability tool. Like, want to get some real data insights. That's excited.
Cool. Appreciate your time. And when you've implemented this stuff and you're at a point where you've got some data into your tool, follow up with me and we can have a final call, seeing it all working. And yeah, that's kind of quite exciting, I think.
Definitely, I'm looking forward for that.
Right. Thanks, Petro. Take care.
Take care. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.